Item 9.2, discussion and possible action on activities eligibility. Mr. Orton, if you'd come forth and present what you have.
I gave you a packet before the meeting, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to discuss our eligibility policy with you. Why are we here? I've had several parents that have come forward and asked me, felt like that their student was eligible, may have been eligible at another school, and just wondering what the differences were at our high school. So to have some parent concerns. I've had several of our coaches ask that we look at the policy, felt like that they would like to see somewhat of a change, and they'd like to be more active in working with the athletes on eligibility. And then I did have a patron that sent me an email requesting that we look at the policy and consider some sort of modification there. So when I started to look at the data, I wanted to give you a little background in the parameters for the data. The data is from our school years 2011 to 2016. It is from the fall and spring semester eligibility reports that I got from Tony Martinez. The data is disaggregated by gender, 9 weeks, and semester. And then we did that to protect individual students from being identified. So if we disaggregated it too far down, there was a possibility that you might be able to discern who that student was. The focus was on 9-week ineligibility because that is where our policy is different from other schools. So we have a policy of 9 weeks, eligibility by 9 weeks, and most schools have eligibility policies that are semester school policies. So that's why we focused on our 9 weeks. Numbers are reported as raw data totals and percent of total student population. So getting into the numbers. And again, I highlighted the 9-week raw numbers, and you can see that those numbers represent students who are affected by our unique eligibility policy. These students would be eligible under KSHSAA rules, but are ineligible under our policy. And
So just a quick question on that.
Oh, yes, sir.
So like on the first one, fall of 11, there was 11
11
males
that were affected
ineligible
that 9 weeks.
just by our policy. They
Just
would have
by-
been eligible by KSHSAA policy?
They would have been eligible by KSHSAA policy. And as you can look over at the male semester number 21, that's 21 students who were affected by the KSHSAA policy. So they would have been ineligible whether or not we had a 9-week policy or not. So if you're looking at the numbers, you take the 9 weeks numbers plus the numbers of the male of the semester, and that's the total number of students who are ineligible for that 9 weeks.
So 32?
32 for that 9 weeks.
And so the percentage of enrollment, that's 2.8 out of the
2.8 out of the, that's 11 out of the 393 for that semester.
Okay.
Okay. So if you look down, recently we've had up to 7.89 at a high, and currently it's 4.07% of students that are affected by the 9-week policy.
And our policy is different, that we just have a 1F policy, correct?
It's 1F, you are able to participate. 2 or more Fs, you are ineligible for 9 weeks or semester.
Whereas the KSHSAA policy is,
2, you have to be passing 5 of 7 courses, so 2 Fs, you can still participate,
okay.
so, in that semester. Yeah, so. Any other questions? So, again, I just broke it down by percent of total enrollment, talking about those numbers of males and females that are affected by the policy, and made that as a percentage to kind of let you know total.
I want to make sure I'm clear on this. So,
Sure.
So we're looking at a highlighted, well, let's see.
Sure.
I'm going back one to the raw numbers, and so, just so that I fully understand what I'm looking at here. So what you are suggesting under the table that is raw numbers, which is the one before
Right.
that percent of total enrollment one, what you're suggesting is if I look at this table, and I look at fall 16 under male 9 weeks, you are telling me there are 16 male students who are ineligible during a 9-week period here in Parsons High School who would otherwise be eligible if we had the KSHSAA policy. Is that the correct interpretation?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. So then whenever I go across this table to male semester, that's where I'm.
That's the number of students who are affected by the KSHSAA policy.
And that's in
So-
addition.
So that's in addition to
Okay,
the number
30.
that are
All right.
on,
so I got you.
yeah,
All
so.
right.
So these, I'm sorry, these 16, they did not pass 5, they failed 2 last spring.
Correct.
And so they would not be eligible this fall for fall activities.
No, they would have failed 2 or more. Now, if they failed 2, they would be eligible for the fall semester by KSHSAA.
Don't talk about our policy.
But by our policy, they are
It was
not.
so that number 16 is reflected in last spring's,
Correct, last
not last 9
spring's-
weeks.
Last spring's final grades.
And how many, do you have an idea of how many out of those numbers wanted to participate in an activity? I mean,
I'll be honest with you, probably about half,
okay.
you know. Because I believe we did have some that at the 9 weeks, they did start participating in the activities that they were out for.
So they got their grades back up and then,
Actually, the 9 weeks came up.
oh yeah, you can for
And
football.
then you can, so.
We have a handful of students who are currently right now participating. They're practicing, but they are ineligible from the last semester grades until this semester. So that as long as they pass the classes at 9 weeks, they'll be eligible. But since they were already ineligible for a whole semester due to KSHSAA, they cannot participate in the contests until January. We have a handful of those students.
Okay. That addresses my question then.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions?
So we kind of have a double eligibility.
Yes, sir.
Ours, which is more stringent than
Yes.
KSHSAA, but we also have to follow the 5-semester rule, 5-course rule per semester.
Yes. We follow KSHSAA rule,
Yeah,
but
we have
then
to.
we have an additional, a more stringent policy at 9 weeks to do that. Okay.
And I know you have the information here, but we haven't really had time to look at it.
Yes,
Most
ma'am.
of the southeast Kansas schools, do they go by KSHSAA or?
I'm glad you asked that question. I'm going to show you just an overview of the current policies of all the SEK
Okay.
schools, okay? All schools except for Parsons have a semester eligibility policy. We are unique in our policy. So I highlighted in your packet just what basic eligibility policy is. So Parsons High School In order to participate, you have to, unconditional eligibility is no more than one F. Okay, so if you have one F, you can still participate that 9 weeks. If you are ineligible for 9 weeks if you have 2 or more Fs. Okay? If you have 2 or more Fs, you're ineligible for, or if you have 3 Fs, you're ineligible for the semester. So, that's Parsons. Okay, so, Pittsburgh, pass 5 subjects. That is their eligibility. Okay? Indy, again, you're passing 5 subjects. Okay, it's number 8 on that second page. Chanute's a little different. Chanute is students with a D or an F average may only miss a class if that, for the activity with the permission of the instructor. So they put it on the instructor to say yes or no, you may go participate. That's a little tough, but that works for them. Field Kinley is pass 5 classes. Okay. Fort Scott, a little nebulous on trying to find out what their policy is, but it's basically follow the Kansas State High School Activities Association. So it would be 5 subjects. And Labette County is pass 5 subjects. So to answer your question, Joan, it's basically we are unique in our eligibility policy, that we have a 9-week policy. Okay. So why are we asking for change? Right now we have several at-risk programs. We have JAG, we have CIS, we have after-school tutoring to help our students be successful. There are a lot of studies that show that athletics and activities are an excellent way to increase attendance, improve grades, and decrease discipline problems. We keep them engaged in our school and keep them engaged with adults who are somewhat important in their lives. We are now being asked to teach 21st century skills to our students. That's communication and collaboration, creativity and innovation, creative thinking and problem solving. And that's exactly what our athletics and activities programs do. They teach those skills. So we feel that the current policy kind of takes away from those goals that we have. So what am I proposing tonight? I would like for the board to consider modifying our current policy. Then I would like to work with our coaches to develop an eligibility policy, present that to you at our next board meeting, and then ask for approval for that. Then I would like to implement that policy for the spring of 17 semester, next semester. I'd like to document the progress of that policy, and then review that data and make changes if necessary, and then report back to you in May and give you those findings and either make changes or continue with the policy.
One of the issues, when we first started this, our thought process was if we caught those kids earlier at 9 weeks, we used to wait till the semester, and we thought if we caught them at 9 weeks, that the strive there was for them to bring their grades up because they want to be involved. And I think what we're finding is that while that may work for some, but for the whole with the numbers, it's more of a fact of, I'm not involved. I'm losing my involvement in that, and it just kind of goes away. They don't get back into the eligibility for that meeting. We know, I was on the KSHSAA executive board for 2 years, and every year we did the report of the number of students that are involved in extracurricular activities, and it continues to rise. So it's working. They're being involved. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're playing football or basketball. They're involved in choir. They're involved in debate. You know, we currently have kids who are not eligible in choir, and they don't get to compete when we do our choir competitions. But since part of their grade is performing, they still get to sing at the choir concerts here at school. And football or basketball or baseball, if they're not eligible, they practice, but they're not going to compete. So they're a little bit different, but they're kind of the same. It's an extracurricular activity that we feel if we can get these kids to stay involved in those extracurricular activities and have somebody there that's looking after them, you know, we want to put some more of this onus on the coaches to take an active role in, you know, setting that tone for their kids, whether it be, you know, mandatory study halls or things like that. I think the coaches want an opportunity to come up with some of those ideas so that they can monitor that progress as well. So it's not, currently right now it falls on Mr. Orton and the counselors. And we would like to give some of that to the coaches because they're with those kids every day. And the thought is that they're checking those grades and working with them, and we can find a policy that allows them to be more involved in keeping those kids focused. We think in the long run that that's going to decrease those numbers of ineligible students, which would increase their grades, is the thought process there.
So I guess I'm a little surprised that the coaches haven't had any involvement until this time.
Yeah, well, that's probably not a great word. They're aware of their students' grades, and not across the board. Some coaches do have a study hall. Some will take it upon themselves to do more than others. We would like to have a set policy where that would be a requirement, some type that all coaches are doing. We're doing the same thing in football that we'd be doing in basketball, that we'd be doing in baseball, that we'd be doing in track or whatever.
Yeah, and I guess just to that point, and I know times have changed, but I guess to me, that's the incentive to, if you want to participate, you got to make your grades.
Mhm.
And I'm just surprised that that's not an incentive for those kids to, you know, do something. Plus, like you said, we have CIS, we have JAG, we have to have school tutoring. There's a lot of opportunities.
So,
Well, I agree with you. The one thing that I would like to point out is that when they're involved in activities, they have a closer connection to that adult who's working with them, that coach.
I don't
And
disagree.
and that's a great influence on whether or not they're motivated to get their grades up or not. You know, to please that coach, to be a part of the team, not let down the team, things that we do. When we, for lack of a better term, when they get discouraged and they know, man, I'm out for 9 weeks, they lose that touch, and they tend to just not be a part of the team. They tend to just disassociate with what they're doing.
So have you considered a grade check weekly to determine eligibility on a weekly basis? I know that's a lot of work on your part, but that would keep that individual only out for 1 week. They work hard to get their grades back up and come back out and be a part of the team.
Again, I'd like to bring back, work with the coaches, bring back, have them have some skin in the game as far as what they feel like could work. But yes, we're looking at, we're not saying just ignore grades for a semester. We're saying we have to continue to monitor grades and progress, because if we don't, when we get to the semester, we're doing them a disservice if we don't. So there has to be some of that checks and balances there.
And I know you can't speak for on behalf of all the teachers, but is there any type of consensus between the teachers as far as, you know, do they feel this would be beneficial for the student, not just the coaches? And
Yes, I think that we also see that, you know, participation in athletics leads to more success in athletics, and which leads to a better morale for our school. I think studies show that the more people you get involved in activities, the more involved kids are, and the better the atmosphere is at school, because they're there more. You know, it's everybody pulling together as a team.
You know, I don't know where the balance is on the grade check. Mike, you mentioned weekly. You know, I don't know.
They do weekly at the middle school, don't they? I'm asking. Don't they do weekly at the middle school? sure.
Yeah.
They've been doing that forever.
You know, I think it's a balance on who does it, what amount of effort we're putting on teachers to do this and so forth. If I'm a teacher and I've got to check grades weekly for this and that, I don't know. I mean, I've got to think about the whole process of where we're going. I know why the 9-week one's in there, because we were more stringent than KSHSAA, and so we didn't want to ding someone for a full semester since we were more stringent, so I remember why that's there. We'll ding them for 9 weeks, not a full semester, because we're more strict. Weekly, I can see the advantages of that long-term, but I can also see the work associated with that. I don't know, I'm open to seeing the policy. I mean, Dr. Newland's the longest-standing board member we have. He's been here for about 12 years. How many times has this came before you as a board member? You know?
Well, you know, in this type of a setting, this is probably the first in a long time. It's been talked about, and I don't, you know, at one point we kind of try to set ourselves at a higher standard and saying that, you know, we want our kids, you know, school's important, school's first. I don't disagree with anything you said about, you know, camaraderie and team building and all that. But just the section about, you know, 21st century skills, you know, in high school, these kids are going to be on their own here pretty soon. You can't keep holding their hands to do everything correctly. But I don't know, you know, I hate to not have an opportunity for a kid to participate, but they know the rules. You have to perform at this level or you're not going to be able to participate. And a lot of them choose not to follow the rules. And we're not preparing them for 21st century skills if we do that.
To your point of grade checks, we have a student information system that can do
Right.
grade
Give
checks
an example so you
pretty
can just get in.
quickly.
Punch of a button.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, and I think that that would fall on our counselors and myself to get that out to, and our coaches have the ability to check grades at any time for
I would
their
think a coach would
athletes.
have an incentive to want to be in
Absolutely.
tune with what was going on more than anybody else probably in the building for their athletes.
And Dr. Newland, to your point, I think that we do our athletes, all our students a disservice if we're not monitoring their grades at all times. And I think that's something that if we're not doing that, we're shortchanging them. And I think it's just more of a check and balance, reminding them, hey, you have a grade, let's get that up, let's work on that.
Well, I'll tell you, the first person who monitors my children's grades
Me.
is you're looking at them,
Right.
okay?
Absolutely.
I mean, we are looking at our students' grades even in elementary school because we have that ability to do that. And so I think there's some ownership from that regard as well, so
That is-
let's not forget that component of
That's not the
the
challenge.
piece, you know?
It's not the students.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is part of the problem, but it's not
Yeah.
the students' fault
Yeah,
that
that's
it's
right.
not being done.
That's right.
And the change was made when I was on the board previously, and we worked and worked and worked. We wanted to make sure that we were above the standards, you might say.
High expectations.
So the
It's
change
high.
from KSHSAA was made?
Sure, it was back
Okay,
when I
all
was
right.
on the board previously, and that was before Craig came on after I went
Afterwards,
off.
correct.
The same, yeah. So that's how long it's been. And we worked and worked and we wrestled with this. We weren't doing it to hurt students, but
Right.
we were
Right.
doing it to, we wanted to, you know, we don't want someone with 3, 4 Fs playing anything, and neither should the parent. But, you know, that's not in every home, so we must realize that.
And I think that's kind of where
We
we're
can't
wanting to go.
generalize those things.
Right, you can't, I'm not a big fan of weekly checks for the one reason of, you have a teacher that's doing a huge project, or you have some, my class is inherently more difficult than an art class if they're only doing
Right.
one project, and then you
Sure.
kind of pit them against each other, which is not healthy.
Right.
But I think somewhere in there, a weekly check, maybe they, okay, you got this, your grade is this low for this week, you now must go to study hall, you have 2 weeks or a week to get it. Something along that nature where there's a step-by-step process that everybody can see and agree to. I think that's kind of where we want to like to go, maybe at least look at that venture and bring that to you and have a more concrete discussion of here's how it's going to go, this is what's going to happen. You know, because I agree, you can't just say, okay, we'll wait till semester and check grades, that's too late. And 9 weeks, really, to be honest with you, is probably too late as well. I mean, that's why we've moved everything to 5 weeks now, and we're trying to communicate with parents, and you'd be amazed. I mean, we do have the ability for every parent to get on a computer and look, but they don't always have access, or they don't. I'm lucky. I work here. I get on that computer every day. I can look at my kids, but I think sometimes we take that for granted and say, well, you can get on a computer. Yeah, I can when I have one, or the internet's up and working, or I'm not at work, or so. I would like to at least maybe look at it and see if we can come up with a proposal that meets what Dr. Newland's talking about, and then also there's an opportunity there to not just completely penalize them for that 9 weeks. There's got to be some checks and balances involved along the way.
Well, this is a, fresh enough board with, Olivia, when she was involved with the policy to begin with, I think this is prime time, so I say bring the policy on in the next meeting and we'll talk about it, but.
I think it's
think through
admirable
it.
that you want to undertake this time of year.
Yeah.
So I'm all for,
One thing that I didn't see there, and I don't know if you could even track it, but we have a lot of mobility in our student body, students that are moving in from other districts. Do you have any idea how many students that come in from another district, and we're using the grades that they have from there, would be eligible? Were
That's a-
eligible from the district they came from, and now they're in our district and they're
That's the
not?
key on a transfer. It goes to the district that they're coming from. On that form, it says, would they be eligible in the current school? Because you don't want to double punish them going to someplace tougher. If we're more lenient, but they were not eligible at our school, then we have to ask special permission to the state to get them to become eligible. But you can't. They don't want you to go, all of a sudden, you've gone from one that's least strict to one that's more strict. But that's all in that paperwork. But it does ask, would they be eligible at their current school? And if the answer is no, then there's a lot more that we have to do to allow that student to be eligible when they come to us.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'd like to know, here's what bothers me. If a student is just not turning in their work, that would be bothersome for me.
Mhm.
I'd like some more information in regard to what are some of the issues, why? What, is it because they're not turning in work? Is it that it's above their heads? What is the reason? Like Dr. Newland said, and Mrs. Lyons said, 2 or 3 Fs, that's not acceptable. And I'm surprised other school districts would not want to do the same thing, because the goal is to prepare those kids, like Dr. Newland said, for the 21st century, and failure is not an option. So, and if we have these tutoring programs and the JAG program, no one should actually be failing. That's the disturbing part of it. And years ago, I wrote to Keisha, what's his name, Musselman?
Musselman?
And originally, many of the schools were, when this was done, the past 5 classes, many schools only had 6 periods.
Right.
So it was a 1F, that got changed into a 1F policy, and then we switched to 7 periods. And then it became a 2F policy, because you still passed 5 out of the 7 classes. So there's some merit into what you're trying to do, as long as we're on the same page. And I did check with Emporia and Pittsburgh. They do some of the weekly grade checks like you said.
Yeah,
So-
Pittsburgh has it in the packet. We left all that because it's rather long, but they'll do a probationary period of 2 weeks.
Exactly.
And, utilizing their after-school programs, which we have a lot of things in place right now that we can utilize in we're not utilizing them now unless, it's not written in policy where you must go to get that tutoring, or you must go we have those in place already set up that would really, we could use those to our advantage in the policy.
And this goes along with the Kansans can. We're always looking for what can they do, not what they can't do, and look for a pound of flesh. We need to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to get you up to snuff with some of these grades? And if those failures are in core classes as opposed to electives, that's certainly going to affect their graduation too.
I would anticipate it is in core classes, the
Yes.
majority of.
Majority of them.
Yeah,
It's more, mostly core classes.
yeah. Other comments at this time? Okay, so I think that this board wants to see a policy recommendation, and then we'll take action next board meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
As your request.